What happens when a country superstar gets into a seemingly mundane TV interview only to be met with the disrespectful conversation of a lifetime? And then after years of patience and grace, what happens when it's upended by one of television hosts ready to break all boundaries possible? Well, today we are getting into that explosive argument that got Joy Behar allegedly out of Dodge, leaving the stage right after the legend's extremely blunt response. But before we get to that moment that flipped the mood all the way around, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave us a comment. Because at the end of the story, you'll be asking yourself what exactly led us all here. Sound of fan turning. The studio lights blazed Tuesday morning. Willie Nelson got ready for the couch of The View. A 90-year-old country superstar already seen it all from chats with Johnny Carson to debates with David Letterman. Willie Nelson had made it a point to stay at peace while facing some truly intense question for decades now. But he could tell from the minute the first cameras lit up that this was going to be anything but business as usual. Joy Behar especially looked like she could barely keep it together before they even hit record. "Alright, we're back in 30. Hollered a stagehand as Willie relaxed his now famous braid for a moment and ran through his usual notes about talking points, including his next album and a world tour. In reality, he was pretty looking forward to it. The View gave a wider spread on country music than he was used to. Whoopi and Joy can be seen at the table talking, but not Mike D. While they were all settling in, Joy was turning through her notes. She grumbled, "I still don't see why we're given this much of your time after music already peaked in the 70s. This was clearly meant to be a private word to the other panelist as her co-host immediately started throwing guilty yet understanding looks her way. Whoopi with clear eyes, "Joy, he's not even 10 feet away." But of course the word only fueled Joy further. "Oh please," as if he does not see how dated he is. The comments still echoed in the air, but Willie didn't flinch much, not on the outside anyway. His wizened face had barely moved, his expression remained mostly impassive. However, those observant kind eyes flashed with a spark, an alertness that had been honed over generations of surviving in a business, in a world that wasn't exactly gentle. And with that, a countdown echoed throughout the stadium. "We're live in 3, 2, 1. Cameras rolled. Whoopi, welcome to The View. We're back in 30 seconds with the country music icon and legend Willie Nelson, who's just released a 73rd studio album. Willie, thank you for joining us. WLEEN. Well, it's my pleasure. Whoopi whoopie ain. And it looks like a 73-year reign, huh? We were reading up on that number, Willie. Whoopi I hen. Well, Joy, you were actually going to jump in with a question here. So Willie, let's be honest here. 73 albums. Are you really just repeating yourself or what? I mean, how many times have we dusted them? How many times can you sing about trucks and heartbreak and everything in between? The coaches grimacing, Sarah Hayes clearing throat, Alyssa Farah Griffin glancing down, but Willie just stayed quiet. And you let her continue. And kept it together. Until, which frankly, can be a lot when you've been singing about trucks and heartbreak for decades. You know, are you getting tired of it, or are you still finding the joy after, at 73 albums you're still out there? And she takes a breath. Come on, you're what, 90? Isn't it time to be home singing those same songs for your grandkids and just let more relevant voices have that time? Ooh. And Willie once again looked around the table but then Willie paused, and this one will shake you up, as the legend decided that this was not the interview this should be. In his naturally humble tone, he says, "Well, Joy," he started again slowly, "I find it interesting that you think I should just stop pursuing my passions simply based on my age. Some might call that ageist silence." Studio gasps in union. The temperature inside had risen by 20 degrees as everything just stopped for a solid 5 seconds. Because what was happening right here was going to send a message across the television airwaves that nobody would forget, and you aren't going to want to miss the end of this. Subscribe now and comment on what you would have said to Joy. Joy's face flushed as she leaned forward, obviously not backing down. "Ageist? I'm just stating facts. Your era had its chance. This is 2021. But Willie didn't respond as she seemed to hope. Instead of growing defensive, he calmly reminded her the world had already passed by her limited thinking about him. "And yet here I am," Willie replied, his voice even and measured. "Still writing, still touring, and still playing to audiences of all kinds and ages. Last month I was in Austin and played for 40,000 people. I'd bet half of them were younger than 30. Joy blinked. Probably nostalgia tourism if you ask me. Anxious murmurs began to swirl around the table, and before the situation could worsen, Whoopi quickly stepped in to try to salvage the conversation. "Willie, what can you tell us about your new album and working with Billie Eilish?" Joy could still not be let go of it. That girl had to have no clue what she signed up for when you pulled her under your wing. And did you know music, or were you just in hopes of still hanging around by clinging to a current pop sensation? An absolute hushed stillness blanketed the studio. Even the faint whirring of the cameras seemed amplified as those gathered held their breath to see Willie's response. Members of his band sitting just behind him shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. What should have been another tense but straightforward interview had gone far over the edges. Joy, Willie said, leaning slightly forward. His tone was quiet but tinged with the quiet gravity that held over 60 years of experience. I've been in this business for over 60 years. I've been on stage with Ray Charles and with Snoop Dogg, with Dolly Parton, and with Norah Jones. For me, collaboration is not about staying current, it's about finding artistic common ground. Joy did not appear to be any more impressed. Well, isn't that special? It's probable you called those kids in hopes they would offer some handouts you so badly need, she fired back. The audience was squirming, as at that moment, someone in the back of the studio finally let out their opinion. Just enough, Joy. A stunned Alyssa immediately tried to jump in. Willie, as I understand it, you have dedicated a significant part of your life and career to supporting America's farmers. I can tell you that so many in America would applaud your activism with Farm Aid. Before Alyssa finished, Joy again hijacked the interview again. Farm Aid? Oh, don't even get me started with the handouts. You guys have probably been beating that horse all to hell for the past 40 years. If those farmers ever learned how to adjust to modernity instead of feeding off the leavings of yesterday's musicians, they'd not have need of some charitable concert. What she just broadcast in her venom-laden voice hit home in a deeply profound way. She did not just insult his recent collaborations or try to dismiss his continued contributions. Instead, she had struck out at something he cared deeply for, something he had spent the greater part of his 80-some years helping. Willie's expression changed slightly. His jaw set not in an overly obvious angry manner. He leaned back in his chair, studying Joy with his usual easy laid-back expression, and once again when he spoke it came from the other end of a conversation. His voice took on a softer timbre when he spoke that now commanded a heightened air of quiet respect. You know, Joy, he began, you just might be surprised if you actually spent a day with the farmers of this country and witnessed what it's really about, because here are the men and women who feed this nation and often do so at a great personal risk and hardship. Joy brushed her hair away and snickered under her breath. Spare us the down-home sermon, Willie. It's not the 1980s anymore. Every face in the room was in pain to look and listen to such utter trash. Sarah Haynes did not seem any happier. Even the production crew behind the scenes exchanged signals that they were looking like they might be getting out of hand. But the interviewer seemed lost in a fog, oblivious to all of those around her. Willie remained calmly, sat back and continued to study Joy like a lion ready for a fight and showing the long patience that could only be possessed by a man well past his 80 years and only for now. You know, Joy, I've done a lot of TV in my life. I've been interviewed by people who disagree with me, people who don't get my music, and plenty who just straight up don't like me. But I've never run into someone so dead set on disrespecting the guest. Joy's sudden burst of laughter wasn't the warm, hearty kind, it was hard-edged and grating. Disrespectful. I'm just asking the questions that nobody else is willing to, because everyone else is so afraid of your delicate sensibilities. Someone has got to tell you your time is up, and apparently that role has fallen to you because the entire music business is too scared to hurt your feelings. The studio at this point had become a powder keg crackling with tension. Cameras maneuvered closer for tight shots, knowing that something seismic was about to happen. The audience members and the members of Willie's band sitting nearby had begun to murmur among themselves, one of the musicians even shaking his head in complete disbelief. Whoopi made a valiant effort to redirect the conversation to safer, brighter pastures. Willie, let's talk about Trigger. What an iconic instrument. Joy couldn't resist her final barb, though. That thing's an antique. Frankly, Willie, it looks like it's been dragged across the floor more times than it's been played on a stage. Are you sure you can even get that old beat-up thing to make a sound? Without a moment's thought, Willie reached instinctively for the guitar at his side. Trigger, his faithful companion of 5 decades, the repository of every lyric ever written, every chord ever struck, every standing ovation had ever received. He ran his calloused hand over the scratches and worn lacquer, a lifetime of history, resonating through its body. This guitar has seen me through everything, Willie said quietly, looking down at it. My highs, my lows. Every song I've written, every stage I've played on, it's been there. She ain't beat up, Joy. She's seasoned. Joy sneered, a low guttural sound. Seasoned? Willie, that thing looks like it's about to fall apart, much like your career. Suddenly the air in the room shifted. The jovial atmosphere dissolved, replaced by a heavy silence as the weight of Joy's words settled like smoke after a fire. The camera operators remained steady, their long lenses locked on Willie, but everyone else in the studio was bracing themselves, waiting for the explosion. Willie gazed at Joy for what felt like an eternity, the expression on his face a mixture of hurt, disbelief, and remarkably calm. Then he did something no one expected. It wasn't a smile of amusement or of a man preparing to unleash fury. It was the quiet, serene smile of a man who had finally heard enough. His patience hadn't evaporated, but his boundaries had been irrevocably crossed. If we any other perpation, Willie's voice, though still soft, carried a new authority as everyone in the room leaned in. I think we're gonna need to have a real conversation here. None of this pretend show talk you've been peddling for the last 10 minutes. Just a plain honest one. Joy rolled her eyes with an exaggerated sigh. Oh goody. Here come the down-home wisdom. Willie's smile didn't waver. No. Here comes the truth. The quiet in the studio intensified so profound you could hear the gentle whir of the air conditioning above them. You've spent the past 10 minutes trying to beat down a 90-year-old man on national television. Willie continued, his tone measured but firm. You've insulted my music, my age, my collaborators, my efforts, and now my instrument. Tell me, Joy, what exactly do you think you are accomplishing here? Joy, ever defensive, fired back instantly. Journalism. Shamordissing. Hoigipi mountains that matter. Willie chuckled, and the sound was a far cry from the warm, hearty laugh they'd heard earlier. It was a knowing sound, and it cut through the studio like a honed blade. Is that what you call it? Because to me right now it looks like you are hell-bent on humiliating a guest so that you can feel good about yourself for one afternoon. The audience went absolutely still. Every head was turned toward Willie and Joy. Joy's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowed slightly. I don't need to make myself feel good about myself, she spat. I've been on television longer than most people on this earth have been alive. Willie absorbed her words, a slight nod acknowledging her long tenure. He then delivered a retort so exquisitely calibrated, so perfectly phrased, it left the room utterly frozen. And yet Willie said, a hint of incredulity in his voice, I've never in all my years in the entertainment business witnessed someone try so desperately to diminish themselves. Silence descended again, deafening and thick. And what happened next would prove to be beyond the imaginations of anyone tuned in to the morning talk show that day. Joy's usually cheerful face took on an even richer hue of puce than before. Excuse me? You heard me, Willie replied, unmoved. You're sitting here and attempting to denigrate a lifetime of work by one individual, and all you're managing to do is broadcast to everyone watching exactly what kind of a shallow person you really are. Whoopi interjected quickly. Willie, maybe we should. No, Whoopi, it's all right, Willie interjected with a soft gesture. Joy wanted an honest discussion, so let's have one. He looked back at Joy. You've made your point crystal clear. I'm irrelevant. My music doesn't matter. The things I champion are passé. What I find fascinating, though, Joy, is how you know so much about my career for someone who is quite clearly of the opinion that it's over. Joy opened her mouth to speak, but Willie pressed on before she could make a sound. You quoted my many collaborative works with younger artists. You brought up FarWhat. You listed the number of albums I've recorded, 73 was it? That's a rather considerable amount of knowledge about a person whose time on this planet and in music is supposedly winding down. Joy sputtered. I do my research. Willie grinned again, a lopsided wolfish grin. Or perhaps he said softly, you've been a fan of my music for longer than you care to admit. Perhaps there's something about this old, irrelevant music of mine that keeps drawing you in. That's ludicrous, Joy protested, her voice escalating with each syllable. Willie leaned back in his chair, seemingly completely relaxed as the spotlight shifted now completely on Joy. Is it? You know, it's funny the things you notice about people who expend so much energy attacking music artists they claim they have no interest in. Often those people are fighting an inner war. Joy's eyes hardened instantly. Don't psychoanalyze me, old man. The jibe hit the room like a physical blow. In several places you could hear a collective gasp. Sarah Haynes was actually covering her face with her hands. Willie raised one eyebrow, amused. Old man. Well, I'm glad to see you're willing to let go the veneer of journalism and reveal the raw prejudice. That must feel liberating. It's not prejudice, Joy snapped. It's the truth. You're old. You're irrelevant. Your music is irrelevant. Willie's eyes didn't waver. And yet he said evenly, I find myself here on your show having my 73rd album debut at #1 on the country charts last week. You know how many of those irrelevant old artists end up there? Joy lost control of her train of thought again. Country is not a real music chart. The audience's patience was up at last. Shouts of outrage rippled through the studio audience, several people standing and booing. One man yelled, "That's enough, lady." A woman in the front row shouted, "Shame on you." The roar of dissent escalated until Willie calmly raised one hand, and in a matter of moments the crowd fell utterly silent. The almost palpable authority behind that gesture spoke volumes. This was not power taken, it was power earned. It's quite all right, folks, Willie said with a relaxed smile. Joy's entitled to her opinion. It just so happens to be an opinion born of ignorance. Joy flamed with anger. Ignorance? Willie repeated coolly, his eyes never leaving hers. Yes, ignorance. You've casually dismissed a genre that gave birth to and influenced rock, hip-hop, and virtually everything in between. You've insulted millions of fans who have drawn inspiration, solace, and plain fun from country music. You've done so by your own admission while admitting to having absolutely no clue what you're talking about. It finally caught her. For the first time in her tenure on the panel, there was actually an expression on her face that could only be described as a stammer. Alyssa jumped in at that point to offer assistance. Well, Willie, with artists from every single genre you beat, but a palpable tension lingered. The damage was done, and Joy had been exposed, but that didn't mean it wasn't about to get worse. Thank you, Alyssa, Willie said slowly, shaking his head, a half-smile touching his lips. That's very kind of you to say. His attention then slowly, purposefully shifted to Joy, but I don't think Joy is as interested in discussing musical influence or cultural impact. I think her greater interest is in being cruel for public consumption. I'm not being cruel, Joy instantly retorted, her lips pulling into a thin line. I'm being honest. Willie looked at her with perfect unsettling calm. Are you? Then allow me to ask you something, Joy. When you go home this evening, are you going to go into the mirror and take pride in the way you treated a guest who was here this morning? Or are you going to be happy and feel good about wasting time on national television, putting a man's feelings into public jeopardy? Joy's jaw fell open, and then slowly closed. She obviously hadn't expected the conversation to be so personal now. Willie continued, his voice deceptively mild. Because I think that's truly what this is all about, isn't it? You thought you could capitalize on your platform to diminish an old man who gave his life's work to an industry you clearly want to see change. You thought you could embarrass me and discredit all that I've ever done, and you figured you'd make yourself viral in the process. By making fun of me. I was not trying to make fun of you, Joy insisted. Willie didn't flinch. Then will you help us all at home, Joy, understand exactly what you were doing? Will you enlighten us as to why you thought it was appropriate to attack me, a guest on your program who was here in good faith and on schedule to talk about my new music? Joy glanced desperately around the studio at the faces of her colleagues. All of the faces stared back at her blankly, or in some cases just down intently at their notes. The production crew behind the cameras looked embarrassed at the exchange taking place in front of them. After what felt like an eternity, Joy stammered out, I was asking legitimate questions about the current relevance of musical artists in today's industry. Willie's gaze narrowed, a flicker of amusement appearing in his eyes. Legitimate questions? I see. He then slowly, methodically began to take her own words and hold them up for inspection. So when you made a comment that my current collaborators were all charity cases, was that a legitimate question? When you mocked the thousands of farmers who have struggled to protect their families and their land, was that an objective journalistic inquiry? And when you referred to my guitar as being in its final stages of decay and on its way to a museum, was that part of an investigative process? Each question was delivered with pinpoint accuracy, and Joy was noticeably recoiling from them. Her bold posture started to wilt, and for the first time all morning it seemed like Joy actually comprehended that all of America and perhaps the rest of the world was looking at her very differently now. You're putting words in my mouth, Joy cried, but without any of her prior forcefulness. Am I? Willie's voice was still quiet but firm. Then let's go back over what we actually heard you say earlier. Shall we? The studio fell into an anticipatory quiet. Willie took a slow, steady breath. You suggested I was rehashing old material. You suggested I retire and leave it to the young dogs. You indicated that young artists only collaborated with me out of pity. You belittled Farm Aid as a dead horse, suggesting the hard-working men and women who are trying to preserve their livelihood are simply looking for handouts. And then you commented on my guitar and stated that it belongs in a museum, an unfortunate and obvious symbol of my collapsing career. The brilliance of what Willie was saying was not in any clever insult, but simply holding up a mirror to everything that Joy had said in the last 5 minutes. And she realized with a mortifying jolt of awareness that her confident performance of moral judgment, of smart critique, had actually fallen far short. Her body slumped slightly in her chair. I was trying to make a point about the industry, she murmured almost to herself. Willie slowly shook his head again, a sad little smile on his face. No, Joy, Willie stated softly, his voice ringing with unexpected sincerity. You were trying to be hurtful. It's a fine line between offering critical analysis and simply being mean. And you went far over that line in the first 30 seconds of this interview. The words hit her with more impact than any insult Willie could have delivered, or even that any of the viewers. Then there was another almost comical shift in the studio, as Sarah Haynes broke the somber tension. Willie, your class is beyond amazing. Truly a masterclass in grace under pressure. But all of Sarah's well-intentioned words couldn't hide the uncomfortable question that hung silent and huge in the studio. Could this interview possibly continue? Thank you, Sarah. But one thing has to be very, very clear. My problem is not with people not liking my music. And God bless anyone, they have every right to like whatever they want to like. What it comes down to is the cruel pleasure they're taking from telling me they don't like it. A deep mottled red now pulsed in and out of Joy's complexion. I wasn't being cruel. I wasn't being cruel. He rose and turned back to her directly into her eyes. Joy, maybe this is a life lesson. Let me tell you something. When you attack someone's life's work with overt joy, when you go after someone based on their age and their age accomplishments, when you slam things people hold dear in their hearts, as you've just done with this award, and that's going to be delivered on TV, and it isn't journalism, it's something far less honorable. An audible exhalation rolled through the studio audience and spread even to the cameramen, before Willie continued unhurried. And you know, Joy, what irks me the absolute most about this? His voice rose slightly in pitch yet remained measured and calm, without even a hint of falter in the sound quality. This whole career has been built on trying to identify yourself as an outsider or a defender of the have-nots and marginalized, and today you stood there, used all of your influence, and tore into a defenseless individual solely for his age. How does the defender of the downtrodden defend the decision to go after and bludgeon a vulnerable figure? Suddenly, the calm, put-together demeanor she presented earlier was not just rattled, it had completely crumbled. How dare you call me a bully? Willie Nelson, who's always claimed to support civilized causes such as civil rights, feminism, and all things progressive, can stand there and tell me that I was being cruel. Willie didn't waver. I just want to understand, how do you go around the rest of the month touting how you stand for those being mistreated, and today go at some of one for their age? Help me understand that one, because I can't make head nor tail of it. I'm not attacking anyone, Willie. I just think you need to get with the times. With whose times? Yours? Because you're not an underling, or part of some great new movement anymore, either, he retorted sharply. The insult had been delivered, and now with all due haste, the audience exploded into shouts, "That's horrible!" bellowed one viewer, while another screeched, "You owe him an apology." As Willie stood up from his chair and picked up his beloved guitar from its stand, the studio went to complete dead silence for the first time, as if at a funeral or an arraignment or both. He looked across the studio at his accuser, and without malice, but with a profound level of disappointment in his tone, spoke, "Joy, I came today to discuss music. I came today to discuss bridging communities and making them stronger. I came today to discuss putting the fractured pieces of humanity back together again. And it would appear today you decided to demonstrate precisely the opposite and all that is wrong with contemporary communication. Don't preach at me, Willie Nelson." She shouted to her feet, nearly tripping over the cord connecting her lapel mic. "I'm not some country bumpkin you can lecture." Whoopi looked to Joy and with a concerned glance said, "Joy, stop." But it was way too late. Stage fright on a scale that could only compare to a global warming summit gone bad had long since set in on stage fright on a level as it does when you can't articulate what is the source of your being put out, and that comes across in an attack. Shed now jumped out of her seat, and her mask began to completely disappear as he was looking around in some other way. "How do you want me to defend what you think is defenseless or not?" She was in pure attacking mode now, because the hell of it, Willie turned his full attention now towards her. Because the heck of it all, Willie, is the truth. The hell of it all is, you are an aging cowboy that hasn't had a decent record in years, you got real lucky in the 1970s, and now you're still riding the waves of that 70s success because you can't make a relevant song for this time. The studio gasped. Willie, with all his might, contained the urge to throw something. This is just pitiful, honestly. I've been told and shown the true definition of this type of cruelty. You know, I've lived 90 years on this earth and learned a lesson. When someone is coming at you with that kind of venom, more often than not, it has much more to do with who they are than it has anything to do with you. Willie turned away from her, then toward the cameras and the audience. "Folks, thank you so much for all of your kindness today. We're here to make music. We're here to bring people together, and I hope that's the focus moving forward." But Joy's rage was ratcheted up another notch. She had turned so purple, it seemed she might pop. "Don't you dare dismiss me. Why did you be doing?" Willie slowly turned back toward her, and his expression softened. In those clear blue eyes, no longer filled with the fire of indignity, now lay an expression that could have almost passed for pity. "Joy, I wonder if you could take just a moment and ask yourself why you're really so angry with a 90-year-old man who came all the way here just wanting to talk about his album. Why is your blood boiling?" "Nothing's boiling. I just cannot stand a fake humble act." Willie didn't flinch. "There is nothing fake about treating people with respect. You should try it sometime." And that was it. The argument was over. She suddenly shrieked, ripping off the microphone and flinging it at the floor with a crash. "I don't have to sit here and take a lecture from an out-of-touch, washed-up dinosaur." And with that, Joy stormed towards the exit. But before she exited the room entirely, Willie called out her name just as softly as he had done all interview long. Joy. I hope you find whatever it is you are looking for. She paused in the doorway, turned around one final time, and spat over her shoulder. Go to hell, Willie Nelson. She bellowed, and in a whirlwind of purple exited the room to stunned silence. Willie slowly returned to his seat, picked up his guitar, surveyed the room with a gentle smile. Well, he stated placidly, I guess we have some time to talk about music. The audience burst into applause, some with relief, some with riotous joy. Even Whoopi was stunned, though. She rallied to give Willie a look that might have been the closest anything that came close to an endorsement. Everyone, Willie Nelson. His new album is available now in stores everywhere. Willie strummed an achy little chord on his guitar and glanced into the lens. Sometimes he announced with a faint chuckle, the very best way to make it through a tough situation is just to pick up your guitar and make a new song. And in that moment, the awkward, humiliating public dissection became so much more. It became a demonstration of grace, maturity, and true class. So tell me, what did you think of Willie's masterful deflection of Joy's ire? Do you think Willie should have responded in kind, or is that the very last thing this legend would do? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible videos. After all, as we just witnessed, the last word often has nothing at all to do with being the loudest. It simply